Hi, I'm Toby Lapinski for the New England edition of the Fisherman magazine with this week's web fishing report. Well, ICAST 2014 took place last week in Orlando, Florida, and the Fisherman magazine was there to catch all the action. Check out our first preview video on thefisherman.com and stay tuned in the coming weeks for more in-depth coverage both online as well as in print. Alright, moving on to the fishing report. I covered the Connecticut reports this week as field editor Dave Anderson was away for the weekend, and the overwhelming sentiment was one of consistent inconsistency on the striped bass and bluefish fronts. It's been a very difficult year for both surf and boat fishermen to get an idea of where that next bite will take place. Really, a lot of the people I spoke to have been saying, well, they try to guess what the next tide's going to do, where the next bite's going to be. They've almost been having just as much success just going where they feel like fishing on a given outing. That was my choice this past week, and it proved to be pretty successful. So, unfortunately, it's not a year where you can really easily predict a bite, but there's fish around to be had. However, over on the fluke and sea bass side of things, it seems like it's a little bit easier to predict exactly what's going on or where you should get that next fish. And it really breaks down to, if you want to catch shorts and try to weed through them to get the occasional keeper, fish shallow, let's say less than 100 feet of water. And if you want to get keepers to fill that cooler on both those sea bass and fluke, you're going to have to fish the much deeper spots in Long Island Sound and outside of the Sound. And we're talking deeper water, 100 plus feet of water. That's really and that was the mark that a lot of guys I spoke to, they said if you're less than 100, shorts. If you're going over 100, you're not getting a lot of fish, but those that you're getting, vast majority of them are going into the cooler as keepers. Hillier's tackle weighed in some pretty big fluke this past week, again coming from some of the deeper waters in the Niantic area, and they had fish that weighed 12.3 pounds as well as 13 pounds. So not sure exactly where they came from, but there's a few deep water spots just outside of Niantic, so those are all likely holding spots. Over in Rhode Island, Mike Wade at Watch Hill Outfitters got word of some much larger bass that were landed over the weekend around Block Island. I saw a whole bunch of pictures of some fish taken that were posted up on Facebook and bounced around the internet. Unfortunately, once again, I gotta plead with everyone to take some responsibility with their striped bass catches. Don't harvest every single big fish that you catch. Don't harvest more than you can consume. Really urge people to release any of the fish that are going to survive and just basically take the ones that aren't going to make it after the battle. I guarantee that if we continue to keep things going with the practices that we have right now, harvesting as many fish as we have, it won't be very long we'll be asking ourselves where the striped bass go, as I fear that we're going down the same route that occurred last time in the moratorium of the 80s and 90s. It's just not a good thing. So again, I urge you to release some of those big striped bass. Let's see, on a positive note, there was some really good scup fishing had across Rhode Island last week. Inshore grounds, both by boat and from shore, some very big scup being taken. Really everyone that we talked to, the party boats coming out of Point Judith, we're getting some pretty big scup mixed in with the fluke. The shore guys were getting some really big some scup off of the places like Watch Hill Point. Under the lighthouse, all the breachways, Charleston, Quaney, Weekapaug, all producing some really good fish. Let's see, Snug Harbor Marina had their shark tournament last weekend, and top honors went to Adam Littlefield aboard the Striker with a 395-pound thresher. It's a really nice fish, and some good photos of the shark posted up on Snug Harbor Marina's Facebook page. Up in Massachusetts, continuing with some offshore news, CMS Enterprise had some good news from the canyons and south of the dump, where their blue water customers were hooking up with tuna and some very big mahi-mahi on light tackle. So that's some great action going on right now. And continuing again, more offshore information. Captain John of Fish Chatham Charters, who I got out with last summer, got my first bluefin tuna ever with, was fishing out by the Regal Sword on Sunday, trolling for bluefin. And he had several hits, missed a couple of fish. I guess there's been a pretty good body of bluefin that moved into that area. And while he wasn't able to hook up, Captain Rich, good friend of his, nailed an 81-inch bluefin on one of the ever-popular hookup custom squid bars. I know those were the lure of choice when I was out there last year, and it's an extremely popular trolling item up off of the Cape for those bluefins, so give that a look. Moving inshore, the canal was so-so last week with some larger bass being caught after dark, mostly down deep on jigs or on drifted eels. Got the word basically similar results from canal bait and tackle and red top. Both said basically the same thing. While there was a little bit of an early morning bite that took place here and there last week, those were more on the smaller fish, and the bigger bass were taken really in the deep of the night and deep waters. And lastly, fluke fishing has been okay with more of the larger fish, again coming from the deep waters off the Vineyard in Nantucket. Not a real lot of big fish coming from the inshore grounds. Pretty much everywhere we've been talking, anglers are really having to work the deeper waters for those bigger fluke, and fortunately mixed in, they're getting some really good black sea bass. So it's worth it to work those deeper waters. So there you have it. That's this week's web fishing report. I'm Toby Lapinski for the New England edition of the Fisherman magazine, wishing you tight lines on the water.